Alright, let's get started with the fun part with the programming now. So we've got our ball inside our arena, but at the moment if we press play in Unity you'll see absolutely nothing happens, no matter if you press the keys or anything, because we've not given any behaviours to these objects. Now you should be fairly familiar with Unity now, so I will not waste any more time with this. We'll get straight to programming. Now one little tip I've found is if you make sure that you synchronize the project. So rather than creating a script specifically for an object and then double clicking to open, it's best if you synchronize the project. So I've got my ball selected here, and I'm going to add a new script to the ball. I'm going to call this player because this is my player, and I'm going to make sure it's in C#, and I'm going to create an add. Now I could double click this and it should open up monodevelop, but sometimes that does crash, so let's get started by opening it up this way. So if we go to assets and open C# project, monodevelop should run up, and you should see the project here. Now the project, obviously you can use little arrows to check for different things. Now this is the script that I made called player.cs. If I double click, it'll open up. And maybe it's a good time now to go over a few of the things to help you in monodevelop if we're going to be using monodevelop. If we go inside monodevelop to the tools and then choose options, you'll see here some of the cool things that we can do to make things a little bit easier. Inside behavior in the text editor, you can insert matching braces, make sure that's ticked, and then the smart semicolon placement, and also format document on save. Those three things also really help when you're coding, because it helps you to, for example, if I start typing something with parameters, by doing a bracket, you'll also get the added other bracket, so you can type straight into the bracket, and also the semicolon can be placed anywhere and it will jump to the end of the code, which makes your life a lot easier when you're coding. There's another couple of things that we can do, but I'll leave them for now. These will help out. Right, we want to have this player, and we want to work out what we're going to need to do with this player. Basically, we want this script to be able to, I'm going to comment it here, I'm going to say move the player. So I've put in the comment with the 2 forward slashes, and this is basically what this script is going to do. Next thing, we're going to go down here and we are going to use the input class to get ourselves some movement and act upon the rigid body of our ball. So if I, nice and simply right now, if I just make a new variable, and we'll make it a floating point variable, and we'll call it x input, and we'll make that equal to the input.getAxis function. Now all of these you can look them up in the help, but because I know them well, you can follow along. If we pass a string with the axis we're looking for to the getAxis function, it will return that axis, and it will stick it into the x input variable. Now we're going to stop right there, and then we're going to go on to the next part. So we're going to affect the rigid body based on this input. So if I press Ctrl S to save this, and then go back to my Unity3d, we'll need to make sure that this has a rigid body in order for this script to affect it, and you can see it doesn't, so it's nice and simple to add a physics rigid body. We can change some of these values if we want and set constraints, but we're just going to leave them as they are. So because this script is now on this level, it's next to this rigid body, we can get this component with the GameObject getComponent piece of code. So if I just do this right now, and I'll try and get the rigid body, so I'm going to do a public variable up here, sorry, not a public variable, just a variable up here for a rigid body, and I'm going to call it RB for short, and then inside start I'm going to say RB equals getComponent, and then inside these brackets we type the type of component we want to get, and because it's a function that takes no parameters, we put the round brackets after it. So you will get used to this one. It's really common inside Unity to be able to get components for scripts so you can act on the other components is one of the main things that you're going to be doing. Now I put it up here so that this is a little message on scope. Because this is up here, it's inside the class, but it's not inside any particular method inside our class. That makes it possible to be able to use it inside start and use it inside update and use it inside any other method that we might want to use. If, for example, I did put it just here, if I just put a rigid body down here, I would end up only being able to use it inside the update, and worse than that, it would try and get the component every single frame instead of the most efficient method, which is get it once and store the handle to it. So this is a fairly common thing to do. I'm just going to continue now, so I'm going to access my rigid body that I got inside the start function, and I'm going to press the dot and then add force, use the add force function to it. Now you'll see that the add force has a few options as I cycle through. Importantly here it can take 3 parameters, and it can also add force mode at the end, and that's a good way of, for example, making something accelerate very quickly by changing the force mode to impulse instead of just your normal. We're just going to use this one here, so we're just going to take 3 floating point parameters. We're going to pass them to this add force, and it will act upon the rigid body. So if I just pass 3 parameters in, so I'm going to use x input, which is the first thing that I gathered from the input of the horizontal axis. I'm just going to use 0 and 0, and don't forget your semicolon at the end of the line. Control S to save, go back to our code, make sure it's compiled, and when we run this, what you'll find is that I should, with the right and left arrow, be able to move the ball. Now some of you will be thinking that this is a little bit slow, and you might be wondering what you could do to make the action a bit more forceful, and I've just given you a clue here. When we add the force, the value we pass in here, if this value was bigger, then we would have obviously more force added. So what we can do is when we gather the x input, the input.getAxis gets a value between -1 and +1. So if we just nice and simply just multiply that by a floating point number of 10, then we should be able to change this so that it will make it a lot more forceful. Now if I've done that, and if I remember to save it, now when I press the key, it will go a lot faster. As it moves from side to side, I can make it go a lot quicker. Right, obviously this is not a particularly useful thing to hard code a value in here. One of the best and most powerful things about Unity is our ability to put in public variables that become visible inside the editor. So if I put in a public float, and I'm going to call that force multiplier, you can call it whatever you want. I think I spelled it wrong. Force multiplier, and I'll initialize that value to 10. What I can do now is I can use this variable. It's a type float, and it's got the indicator that it's public. And I've initialized the value to 10. I can use this down here, and if I like the code completion to help me, I won't need to type it all in. So I've used this variable here. Now why that's cool is when I go back to Unity3d, when this compiles, inside the script you'll see the value force multiplier becomes visible inside the editor. So if I wanted to, I could easily change this just by changing the number here. So if I bump that up to 100, it doesn't matter what is in the code, what it initializes, the editor overwrites that value. So now if I play this one, just pressing the key makes it go an awful lot faster. So fast it shot off the screen, in fact. So you can make this so you can tweak it without having to change what's happening in your code. And often you want to do that and make these variables public so that that will happen. Now, the challenge I'm going to set for you is for you to use basically copy and paste this code where we gather the input, but we want to gather maybe a variable called y input or z input, and you gather it from the vertical instead of the horizontal in order for us to be able to add a value to the z as well, which is the forward and back. In the next video you will I'll show you that code if you haven't managed to get it.